Hello, hello, and welcome to Climbing Sideways, our weird little show where we ask anyone and everyone, what do you do and how did you get there? I'm your host, Adriana de Cervantes. Our guest today is Maeve Spears. Maeve is a public relations professional who is also pursuing her MA at DePaul University's School of Design. After a decade of communication work, Maeve decided to head back to school and pursue her passion for art and design. By day, she works as a PR manager at Puttshack, a tech-infused mini-golf concept, and in the evenings, she's tackling schoolwork and freelance graphic design. All right, let's get to it. Here's my chat with Maeve. Okay, hi, hello.
Hi, how's it going?
It's been good. My house is quiet today. My mom has my kids at the beach, and I will meet them there. I'll drive down when we finish this interview.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Chicago is like overcast and rainy. We're in the high 40s and that feels honestly nice. So very jealous of beach time.
Oh my gosh. Well, we're not, it's not warm, but it is just like a peaceful, lovely little place to escape. Thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited to have you. I've been starting these conversations with bright spots. So do you want to share something good that's going on in your life? Does not have to be work related, but just, something positive that you're enjoying right now.
Yeah, definitely. Honestly, I think being invited to be on this podcast feels like a bright spot. I feel like sometimes the universe just gives me random, unexpected opportunities, whether that's running into an old friend on the L or getting like a free coffee at the local coffee shop. But I was honored to get the email, especially because we don't really know each other very well. And it sounds like the podcast has had a lot of your friends and colleagues. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm super happy to have you. This feels like a good opportunity. Do you want to tell our guests how we know each other?
Yes, I stalked you on LinkedIn when I was looking for grad school programs because you did your master's at Georgetown and it was a program I'd gotten into. And I think you were like the official student ambassador for people who were interested in the program. And so you very kindly did a virtual call with me to tell me your thoughts on the program. Was it worth it? And that's how we got connected.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember you met Wendy like in that process, Wendy Zajac. Before you and I spoke, I texted Wendy because I was like, hey, you just asked me to do this ambassador thing, but I was like, I'm going to be fully honest, right? About like, what the program was like for me. And, I'm not just going to sell someone on Georgetown. And she was like, no, yeah, that's like why we picked you. Like, make sure that you are completely honest or completely frank. And so I do think it's funny that, you and I stayed in touch, but it was mostly because I was like, listen, based on what you want to do, I loved my program. My program is great for a lot of different people. Shout out Georgetown SCS. But yeah, I was like, I don't think that's what you want to do.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I appreciated your honesty. For the listeners, I ended up at a program in DePaul, which I think ultimately made sense for what I wanted to study, but also it sounded like you're East Coast based and being able to have that East Coast connection and do like an occasional meetup, like with Wendy or other faculty or students was a huge benefit. And I was like, the likelihood that I am hopping on a plane to go to Georgetown regularly is very low. So a program closer to home, like in Chicago, made more sense.
Yeah. Okay. The first question that I'm starting every interview with is, what did you want to be when you were a kid?
I wanted to be an artist when I was little. I have always loved drawing, and there's a fair amount of both professional and hobbyist artists on both sides of my family. So it was something that just came naturally and happened a lot when I was little.
Amazing. So how did that come out as a kid and all of the things that you were interested in? Was it one of many things that you were, excited about and doing activities around? Or were you like my now 9-year-old who like will sit at the table for hours drawing and like doesn't want to do any outdoor physical activity?
Probably closer to your 9-year-old. I was signed up for sports. Like I did soccer and volleyball, like I feel like most girls do in grade school, but I certainly was not good. It was more that any form of art, it just felt like a very comfortable space that I knew that what I was doing there. There's a lot of drawing. And growing up, it was just a very like accessible thing. We had a ton of craft supplies in the home. My parents honestly both enjoyed doing different forms of art. So we had like an annual tradition in the summer of going up to Michigan and building fairy houses with popsicle sticks and like hot glue and gemstones. And that would honestly take like a full week, but we were so invested.
I love that.
Or I grew up going to a sleepaway summer camp in Wisconsin that I absolutely loved. And it had a lake, it had archery, but it also had a craft shop where you could make friendship bracelets and tie-dye. And I was a craft shop girl and actually in college worked as the craft shop director at that camp.
Amazing.
But honestly, like any form of artistic expression, I was all over.
Cool. Okay, so then you talked about college. How did you make the decision about where you wanted to go to undergrad? Where'd you end up going, and what did you major in?
Yeah, so I went to University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. In hindsight, I probably should have considered art school more heavily, but I am a bit of a realist. For some of those professional artists in my family, a lot of oil painters, I think they honestly do like amazing work. They've got cool studios, but I think there's also a lot of instability that comes with that career. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I do want health insurance and like a steady paycheck. So I went to Michigan in their literature, science, and arts college. So it's a little flexible. It's a liberal arts program, and found my way into communications and art history. Mm-hmm. Both felt pretty creative in a way that felt a bit more stable. Communications was a bit more of like the marketing side where you could do kind of like some crazy brand campaigns. And that also felt like the time, not to date myself, but that social media was like the Wild West. Mm-hmm. Like Wendy's was starting to be, a little zany on Twitter, and that was a new thing. Or I was the vice president of communications for my sorority, and one of my founding acts was like to create an Instagram for the sorority chapter. So the expression and creativity there, I thought, was kind of like a nice balance. And in terms of Michigan in general, both my parents went to Big Tens. They went to University of Illinois. And so I grew up hearing how great Big Ten is of like, you work hard, you play hard. And I applied to a bunch of schools, but ultimately Michigan felt like the right fit of academically strong, but a little bit different and still close enough to home that if something terrible went wrong and I needed to get back, it was only like a 5-hour drive.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So am I correct in hearing that it was this like, I love art, I want to be creative, but I'm also trying to be practical with how I apply that and how I go out and look to build a career?
Yeah, I think honestly, we're chatting at a time where I've gone through a bit of a career phase where at the time I was like, I will find other forms of art and creativity through like a marketing or a public relations lens. Mm-hmm. And now a decade later, it's kind of circling back to that interest as a child of I still really like art and creativity. And I think I've learned of a lot more career paths where you can be a successful creative and have health insurance that I did not know existed at the time.
Yeah.
But after college, like my first public relations job was for an architecture firm in Seattle, ZGF Architects. And that felt like a good intersection because a lot of the architects there also had some sort of creative practice on the side. They would do a lot of creative events to give back to the community. And we're just really passionate about the buildings they were designing. And so getting to promote that sort of felt like a way of being engaged in the design world, but still threading that marketing needle.
Those architects work really hard. I went to Pratt for undergrad, and there's an architecture program, and it's like a 5-year, really, really, really intense program. So
yeah,
much respect for the people doing the architecture work out in the world. And my son Gabe specifically requested that I get an architect on. So I should have an architect in the next little bit.
That's amazing. Yeah, my dad's a general contractor. And in college, when I was trying to figure out my path, I called him. I was like, I just took an architecture/art history class. Should I be an architect? And he's like, every architect I know is like overworked and underpaid. I do not recommend it. And I was like, he was right. Shout out architects. That is a grind.
Good to have someone in your life that you can ask those questions to, which is like truly a huge part of why I want to do this show is, you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes it's about seeing that something else is possible, but sometimes it's about just being able to hear someone talk about what it's like to do a thing instead of spending a whole bunch of time, money, energy, effort to go to school for something and then try to get a job and be like, wait, JK, I don't like this.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So the other question that I've been asking people, I'm calling this segment the resume. Tell me about a job you would never put on your resume or like your very first job that you ever had, whichever question you're sort of more inclined or more excited to share about.
I feel like my first job was babysitting. So like, that's not very exciting, but a job I would absolutely never list was I worked at the University of Michigan donation call center for a couple weeks in college. I always had some sort of like part-time job in college to essentially pay for like food and beer. And at the beginning, the first 2 years, I was in a undergraduate research program. So I got paid for my work study working in a psych lab, which was really cool. But that ran out. It only applied to like freshmen and sophomores. And so junior year, it was like working at the local preschool. But then senior year, no one really wants to hire a senior because they know you're on your way out.
Yeah.
So I tried the call center and I hated it. Loved Michigan, but automatically dialing people and asking them to donate after they've spent tens of thousands of dollars to attend this university already felt so slimy. So it only lasted a couple of weeks and I was like, you know what? That's fine. I do not need to do this.
Yeah, that's crazy. I've not given money to anywhere that I went to school and I don't like it when they ask. I'm like, I already paid you.
Exactly. Yes. And I'm like, Michigan has so much money already. I think at the end I'd broken even by whatever minimum wage they paid me and how much I got in donations. I was like, you guys are fine. But it's been a good perspective for future jobs where like, I should not work in sales. And now I can appreciate I do not have to cold call.
Okay. So you grew up wanting to be an artist. You went to school kind of, pursuing, but not like full-throated going to art school and going the communications PR route. And then tell me about, you said you worked at an architecture firm. What else did you do after that? And how did you come to the decision to go back to school? Because I know you're back in school now.
Yeah. So as a little added color on working at the architecture firm, that was in Seattle. And so I'm born and raised Chicagoan, like in the city, not the suburbs. And after college, I was like, I have to live somewhere else while I'm young and have no partner or dog or mortgage, and was essentially hell-bent on getting out of Chicago. And was looking at Seattle or Nashville, which I realized are very different markets, and ended up getting that great job in Seattle and genuinely enjoyed the job, but did not enjoy Seattle. So after 2 years, I moved back to Chicago. I realized actually the rain is a lot and all of my friends and family are in Chicago. Community is nice.
Yeah.
It did make me really appreciate Chicago a lot more. But when I came back, I was like, okay, I want to work in some agencies. So for public relations, you can be in-house or at a bigger agency. In-house is you're essentially just dedicated to that one client. And then agencies, there's a bit more flexibility. You have a lot more resources and buy-in. You can change your clients around, but you can also, it's pretty fast-paced. So I came back to Chicago and worked at a series of agencies. I started at BBDO, which is a big ad agency. And I think that's honestly one of the first places where I saw like you could be an art director or a creative director and work on these really cool brands, but be paid to have like this creative sense. The work there was very strong. And then I also worked at the PR agencies Fleischman Hillard and Zeno, that and really kind of like fell into a niche of food brands. So like or consumer packaged goods. So I got to work on things like Aldi or Quaker Oats, which was cool. It felt like proving to myself that I could do like the big girl hard job and work with national brands.
Yeah. And can you say like what you were doing for those companies? Are you designing packaging? Are you designing like, a campaign for a new product, like a new flavor of oatmeal? Like, what does that mean when you say you did stuff for Aldi and Quaker Oats?
Yeah, it's more the latter. It's like coming up with a campaign that almost makes like a news moment, and encourages people to buy more of that product. So an example would be for Quaker Oats, there is an insight that people don't just eat a rice cake naturally. Sometimes they put peanut butter and bananas on it or avocado and pickled onions. And so to promote other ways to eat rice cakes, we partnered with Meghan Trainor because she had that song All About That Bass, and then connected the song to Quaker or to rice cakes to be like, this is the base. You can totally customize it.
Cool.
So it was getting to work with her and her team to do like a photo shoot, to coordinate interviews of like talking to E! News and being like, hey, E! News, you want to talk to Meghan Trainor? You can have her for 10 minutes. She's also going to talk about rice cakes at the end. And she was actually really lovely to work with. But it was things like that of trying to kind of integrate the company into the culture and make it feel relevant and top of mind.
Cool. And you mentioned insights. So are you working directly with people who are doing market research and user research, or are you kind of only seeing what they come up with after they hand it off?
It would be a mix depending on the team and like the size of their budget. So something at that scale, Quaker is obviously a bigger company. So there would sometimes be like a designated strategist who would do a bunch of research. But then sometimes on smaller campaigns, it would be the account team, which is what I was on. And you'd be like, all right, I feel like they like to call them like a human truth, an insight, some sort of data point to make it feel relevant and that people care. So sometimes that research would be done by myself and my teammates.
Cool. Okay. So then what made you be like, no, I'm moving away from this space. I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to go back to specifically get, are you getting an MFA?
It's an MA. It's got a long name. It's in DePaul's design school, but they call it their Masters of Digital Communication and Media Arts.
Okay.
Partially what drew me to it is it's a unique program structure in that it's got 2 tracks, where you can go through it through the communication school or through the design school. And that felt like an interesting progression of what I'd done in communications before, of taking essentially like written or verbal communication skills and stretching them to more visual communication, like a graphic design or brand identity. I will also add, for all this agency work on the side, I was still telling myself, like, no, you shouldn't focus on this. You're doing good. But I did earn a graphic design certificate through the Art Institute of Chicago. And that was really cool. That was like the basic creative Adobe suite, building an initial portfolio, like introduction to typography or getting into the weeds on InDesign. Then also while working in PR, I started to do some freelance work of more projects that I felt really passionate about. But once I had those initial creative skills, I was like, oh, okay, I can make, stickers for this fundraiser or something to that effect.
Yeah, it's like having different tools in your tool belt.
Exactly. Where I was like, I know how to physically draw on paper, but I don't know how to put that on a computer screen. And that was a skill I was able to develop. But yeah, honestly, the tipping point was burnout. I think that might be a theme on your podcast. But last year, I was working like the most competitive job, the most high-paying job I'd ever had, but I was crying all the time. The pace was insane. The work was really good, but it, like in the product and the type of work I got to do, but my mental health was just trash. And so I ended up taking the summer off and looking into programs. I did an art residency in Italy for 2 weeks. And that really like sparked some joy. And so kind of took the summer to recenter and then got into a couple of design programs and ultimately started in DePaul in the fall.
Nice. I'm so sorry to hear that you went through that, intense burnout. I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I think it's such a bummer. My question there is, do you think that that's like baked into that type of agency life? Or do you think that leadership could or would have made a difference? Because I know in the places that I've been the most stressed out, it's often less about the industry, the particular industry, and it's more about leadership and company culture and like what is or isn't tolerated or how people respond to any kind of like pushback. Yeah, one of the most stressed out periods of my life was also working on one of the jobs that was like the least important out in the world. And it wasn't until like 6 months later, it was one of the jobs I was laid off from. I was laid off about 2 weeks after having surgery, which, is highly illegal. But just like a little bit afterwards, I just was like, I can't believe that I was letting dumb air fryers get me that upset. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm on email chains where people are talking about like what the fried chicken looks like on the box. And I'm like, the fact that I was letting that like really upset me to my core is like laughable now to think about it. But it's because of the way that people in positions of power sort of like hold these things over you or make you feel like your job or your stability are going to be at risk if you don't, say how high whenever they say jump.
Totally. I'm like trying to get me in trouble because I'm going to share this podcast on my LinkedIn. But I will say in my last role, I didn't feel like my manager was making my life easier. I think that was definitely a contribution to it. But I also think it is the industry of PR. There's a phrase, it's PR, not ER. Because everything does feel so incredibly time sensitive and important. But there are moments where you're like, we're selling gum, and if we don't sell more gum tomorrow, like we will be okay.
Yeah.
But I have totally felt that internal pressure. My husband, he works in healthcare. And so when we compare our days, he'll be like, it's rare that someone is like having a life-threatening issue, but it's a bit more serious in the grand scheme. And I'll be like, well, I wrote a brochure for Reese's University today and gave input on their mascot, which is a real project I worked on.
I love that. And I mean, these things have to be done, right? I'm never trying to be disparaging for anyone who has worked on anything like that, right? Like it all has to get done. But I do think this acknowledgement of I am so much happier when I'm working for people and when I'm working with people who understand that like our humanity has to come before anything else. Like I'm a mom, I have kids, I have all this stuff going on in my life. And I don't want to be expected to put fried chicken before any of those things.
Totally. And I think we're roughly the same age. And so there's also that tipping point of when you've been working for a while longer, you go, okay, hypothetically, I need to do this for like another 3 decades. And this pace doesn't feel sustainable. I've proven that I know what I'm doing, but it's not that the work's not important, but that there's no work-life balance, or if you're making a higher salary, like there's no time to enjoy it if you're just stressed and anxious about the next day at night. So I feel you. It is sort of that tipping point of like, okay, I would like to spend more time with my friends and family, or I could be paid less if I could then have the freedom to leave at 5 and go to a workout class, something like that.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So if you could go back in time, what would you tell your younger self?
It's a good question. I think this was like my takeaway from my summer of burnout recovery was that you don't always have to do the next hardest thing. I think I'm pretty type A, and the Chicago public school system has a very unique structure that's essentially like you have to apply for selective enrollment high schools in grade school. It's essentially like applying for college. It's very competitive. From 5th grade, I gave myself hives because I was so stressed about my homework load that I'm sure my parents are like, it was not that big of a deal, but that stress and trying to do the most got me into a good high school, which then got me into a good college and then put me on, a quote unquote good career path. But sometimes it is exhausting, and you can take like those moments of rest and just enjoy what you have instead of being like, oh yes, but where I would like to be, I have to keep pushing to be here. Mm-hmm. I think I'm at a point now where I would tell myself like, you will get there. It just you can go a little bit slower and rest a little bit more along the way.
Yeah. And that success can look however you want it to look, that like, whatever you set your sights on, you can go and achieve that. But also like, it's okay to change your mind, or it's okay to reach a certain point and say, actually, like, I kind of want to go do something else now. And that's like, there's nothing that's a failure about that. There's nothing that's like giving up. It's just like deciding that the next thing is going to be different than you originally thought it was going to be.
Totally. And I do think my definition of success has changed over time. You're just making like a calculated decision based on the information you have. And to your point, like your life situation could change. Like you have kids. I'm sure that absolutely readjusts priorities. But that it's okay, to change what makes you happy or what you're shooting for along the way. Okay,
so another good segue, you're saying that you're redefining your own definition of what success is. You're in school and you're also working while you're in school. So major kudos, major claps as someone who also did that. It is very hard. Do you want to tell us a little bit about like, one, what your day-to-day looks like right now as someone who is pursuing a graduate degree and also working, and then talk about where you hope to be in the next 5 years.
Totally. So I will say I did not fully take my own advice on not doing everything at once. Because the way it shook out is I started a new PR job, Puttshack, great company, but intentionally so because back to in-house. They're a smaller brand than I've worked on in the past, but have a much better work-life balance. And I was like, okay, I know I'm going back to school. Like that's going to be an intentional piece. So because they are a strict 9 to 5, and like in the River North area, I don't know how familiar you are with Chicago, but close enough to DePaul's campus that you could make like a 5:45 class after work. I was like, that's huge. DePaul's full-time for working students is 2 classes a term, and their terms are 10 weeks long. So different from Michigan. They're essentially like really quick sprints in between, but that does keep it exciting. But honestly, the balance between the two has not been too awful. I think because the company is a bit more balanced, but it is still doing traditional like public relations marketing for brand by day, and then class at night 2 days a week. And then usually Sundays are like the homework day.
Oh yeah. I remember those. I remember those weekends.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I forgot about homework. Like, I was like, oh, these are like some long readings or, you know, a project that you have to do over the course of 10 weeks. I just did a mobile design class where I used Figma for the first time, and we built an app over the course of the program, which was awesome. But I was with other like UX UI majors, and the learning curve for that was more than I thought it would be. So it was definitely a bit longer on the weekends of being like, okay, what is this platform? I know I need to know it. By the end of 10 weeks, got something good, but it does take some time for sure.
Yeah. I saw the video that you posted on LinkedIn. And it looked great. And I think, again, always good to have another tool in the tool belt. And also, like, don't feel any type of way when you're in class next to people who are specifically very good at that thing. My hilarious parallel to that is like being a photo major in art school, taking foundation classes with people who are there for fine arts and like putting my drawing up on the wall and their drawing up on the wall. It's very humbling. One of the reasons I'm so excited to have you on is that I genuinely believe these conversations are worth having with anyone, no matter where they are in their journey. I remember when you and I first met, I said to you, girl, you don't need to go to SCS because a lot of the people who go to SCS kind of want to do what you're already doing. So now that you're pursuing that art degree, what's your goal for when you finish? What are you excited to do next?
Yeah, my hope is, I think, to seek some of that still corporate stability, but be in a more creative role. It feels a little weird starting out. I wouldn't say I'm new to the industry, but I'm by no means at the level that I would like to be at. I think graphic designer is what I'm shooting for, but I'm also still at that point where I'm applying from what I enjoyed as a kid of like a bunch of different tools and then trying to distill it down. Because I know creatives usually do better when they can find their niche and market to that. And I honestly don't know exactly what that is. So it's been trying to play around a bit more through school or using those resources to kind of push myself. So it's taking a Figma class, but it's also, I recently learned Procreate and made like my own handwritten font through the program, which I thought was fun. Yeah.
Will you send it to me?
Sure. It was like trending on TikTok, and I was like, oh, I could do that. Like, that sounds really fun. So there's different, I think I'm still trying to figure out exactly if it would be like digital illustrator, art director, what exactly, but graphic designer kind of encompasses that the most, or the most squarely in a new box. And the freelance work that I've done also seems to fall relatively in there. So that's what I'm shooting for. I would like to be paid to do graphic design full time. Ideally, I recognize not the best job market to change my mind and go for a creative role, but it's one of those things that I have not shaken that feeling for a decade, and I don't think it's going to go away. So I would like to focus on something that I'm genuinely more excited about for the next 30 years or so.
Yeah. And I think even there are so many different specialties, even within the umbrella of graphic design. There are people who do branding suites. There are people who focus on websites. There are people who like focus solely on, word marks and logo marks. And yeah, it's like this, it's this whole world that you just kind of get to learn and play around in, and figure out which way you want to go. And you're very talented. So I have no doubt that if that's what you want to do and where you want to go, you will for sure figure it out.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And to your point, like it doesn't necessarily feel like starting from zero, especially with like a brand identity, because I think that ties up pretty closely with marketing. In my current role, we just went through a brand refresh, and it's kind of fun to nerd out on the fonts or the color changes and the tone of voice of how that's carried through. So that it doesn't feel like starting from zero, but when you have a network of deeply creative people, it can be a little intimidating at times for sure.
Yeah. No, definitely not starting from zero. No, you're approaching it with like a deep level of understanding of how these assets get applied out in the real world. So that's a huge step up.
Thank you. Maybe my imposter syndrome is showing a little bit.
I will send you this video. It's Alona Mar, the rugby player.
No.
Oh my gosh.
Oh wait, yes. Is she also an Olympian?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Olympic rugby player. She was on Dancing with the Stars.
Yes.
And like fabulous internet personality. She has a podcast with her sisters. There's this snippet that went viral of her talking about imposter syndrome, where someone's interviewing her and they ask her how she deals with imposter syndrome. And she was like, I don't have that. And I'll send you the clip. It's amazing, but it's basically like she was kind of like throwing shade at the journalist. Like, how dare you assume that I have imposter syndrome? She's like, I've worked so hard to get where I'm at. I've like, won an Olympic medal. I like play professionally in the sport that I play in. Like, I'm doing fine. I have no imposter syndrome. So yeah, release the imposter syndrome, which I think, you mentioned being type A. It's hard to do that when you're a type A person because you're very analytical and you're very realistic and you're very self-aware. And so I do think there's this thin line between being fully no imposter syndrome whatsoever and then also being like delusional, right? These like the youngins like to use the term delulu, but be a little delusional.
Totally. It is probably like a bit of that taste gap where like, not to say I have great taste, but like, what it could be and what it should be, but you don't fully have all of the experience to get it to that point. So you are more self-critical. I will say I am reading a book right now called Likeable Badass, which is essentially how to balance being a woman in America, where you have to be both likable and, brave, without being...
And not a bitch.
Yes, exactly. Without being a bitch or a pushover. But there is a section on imposter syndrome where they go through some research and say, essentially, anyone who has it is usually because they have set a very high goal for themselves and they're disappointed to have not made it all the way. Like maybe they make it 75% of the way, but versus people without it will set a lower goal that's more achievable and always hit it or exceed it. So it's like you're eventually achieving more, but because you haven't hit the goal you set, it doesn't feel like it. And then there's that deficit.
Yes, I love that reframing. When you set your sights on big goals, you might only get like 75 or 80% of the way there, but you're still achieving and learning so much more than you would have if you weren't taking any big chances. And dream big feels like a good note to sort of wrap up on. So my last question is there anything else you want to share? Anything else that's going on? It could be things you do when you're not working, which is probably not happening super often right now with work and school. But, hobbies, anything else that you want to share, movies you're watching, places you're excited to travel, books you're reading, anything else you want to tell us before we sign off?
That's a good question. I don't know if this is the best answer, but I am going to Kohler, Wisconsin this weekend.
What's in Kohler, Wisconsin?
That's a great question. I've only recently learned of its existence, but apparently it's very much a thing. It's where Kohler, like the plumbing and faucet company, exists. It's 2.5 hours outside of Chicago, but essentially it used to be a industry town for people who worked in those factories. And the brand has built it out into like a spa and a bunch of beautiful restaurants. And they have a design museum that kind of goes through all of their different plumbing and tile design, but in like a really elegant way. And so I'm going on a trip there this weekend with my husband, and I'm like genuinely curious because now 5 different people have told me about Kohler, Wisconsin. And I'm like, all right, let's see what you got.
Will you please let me know how it goes? Because I am embarking on like a 10-week road trip with my family this summer.
Oh.
And we're going to be going, super northern route out west, and then like a slightly more middle, but still northern. Like we're not doing the south at all on the way back. So Wisconsin, the Great Lakes, like all that kind of stuff. I've not explored too much around there. And so, yeah, we're building out our map and our route. And if it's great, let me know. Maybe I'll hit it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything in Chicago, Wisconsin, or Michigan, I'll give it some thought. I'm biased, but I've spent a lot of time in those Midwest states.
Yeah. I love it. I'll take all the recs, probably except for pizza. I'm like not a deep dish pizza girl. I'm a flat pizza girl.
Honestly, same. I do not blame you. Deep dish, you can have like one slice and then you're like, that was nice. But any more than that and you're going to feel pretty crummy.
Thanks so much for listening to Climbing Sideways. If you're on Substack, follow us there, climbingsideways.substack.com. And of course, we're on Instagram and Threads at Climbing Sideways Pod. You can find Maeve online at maevespears.com or on Instagram at maker.maeve. As always, many thanks to Zubin Hensler for all the mixing and original music for the show. Since our show is brand new and ad-free, please subscribe, share, and write us a review. Those reviews really matter. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another conversation. Thanks so much. Bye.